Carter's mission to destroy the equation fragments had taken him across 3 continents over 8 months of clandestine operations. He'd witnessed horrors that defied scientific explanation, research teams consumed by their own experiments, laboratories that existed in folded space-time, and weapons tests that left permanent scars on the fabric of reality itself. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for what he would discover in the depths of the abandoned Nexus research facility in Prague. The facility was supposed to have been destroyed in 1987, a casualty of the Soviet Union's collapse and the end of their paranormal research programs. Soviet records listed it as decommissioned and sealed, but when Carter and Elena descended through maintenance tunnels that led impossibly deep beneath the ancient city, they found that the Nexus had merely been forgotten, not destroyed. Worse, it was still active, still conducting research that pushed the boundaries of human understanding into territories that might have been better left unexplored. The corridors themselves defied architectural logic. Hallways that should have been straight curved through dimensions that human geometry couldn't adequately describe. Gravity worked differently in some sections, flowing like thick liquid rather than pulling uniformly downward. In other areas, time seemed to flow backward, with broken equipment spontaneously repairing itself and footprints appearing in the dust before anyone walked there. Elena's sophisticated monitoring equipment provided readings that were not just erratic, but fundamentally meaningless. Carter, my instruments are detecting energy signatures that violate basic conservation laws. It's like the facility exists in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously, overlapping and interfering with each other. As they descended deeper into the facility's impossible geometry, Carter began to recognize the theoretical framework underlying its architecture. Someone had used highly advanced applications of his equation to create a space that existed partially outside normal reality, a pocket dimension where extreme experiments could be conducted without affecting the outside world. But the implementation was crude, unstable, dangerous. Whoever built this didn't fully understand the mathematics, Carter murmured, studying the dimensional distortions around them. They've created a space that's slowly eating itself from the inside out. The facility's lighting came from sources that seemed to exist in adjacent dimensions, casting shadows that fell upward and illumination that felt solid to the touch. Signs in multiple languages warned of temporal displacement zones and consciousness fragmentation fields. This wasn't just a research facility, it was a monument to the dangerous ambition of minds that had touched fragments of Carter's work and mistaken partial understanding for complete mastery. In the facility's deepest level, past security doors that phased in and out of existence according to mathematical rhythms Carter could somehow perceive, they discovered the source of the dimensional distortions, a vast chamber filled with crystalline machinery that seemed to extend into spatial dimensions the human eye couldn't follow. At the center of this impossible space sat a figure that had once been Dr. Alexei Novak, Webb's former partner in the research networks Carter and Elena had been systematically dismantling. But the man Carter found was barely recognizable as the brilliant physicist he'd known from scientific conferences. Novak's hair had gone completely white. His skin had taken on an almost translucent quality that revealed strange patterns beneath, and his eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire universes. When he moved, it was with the careful precision of someone whose consciousness existed partially outside normal time, someone who had to concentrate to remain synchronized with the present moment. "You're Carter Thorne," Novak said without turning around, his words echoing strangely in the chamber's impossible acoustics. "The father of the equation that ends not just our world, but the very concept of worlds existing separately from each other. I've been waiting for you across 17 different probability matrices." Carter felt reality shift around him like quicksand. Alexei, what happened to you? What is this place? Novak finally turned, and Carter saw that his former colleague's eyes weren't just haunted, they were somehow older than the universe itself, as if they'd witnessed the birth and death of countless realities, seen the same cosmic tragedies played out across infinite variations. I volunteered for the memory integration experiments, Novak explained, his voice carrying the weight of unimaginable experience. Webb's research team had developed what they considered a revolutionary application of your equation fragments, a way to access quantum probability matrices to experience memories from potential futures encoded in the dimensional fabric of space-time itself. Novak gestured to the crystalline machinery surrounding them, devices that seemed to exist in more spatial dimensions than the chamber could logically contain. The equipment pulsed with energy signatures Carter recognized from his own work, but evolved, transformed, grown into configurations he'd never imagined possible. The human brain. Novak continued with the patience of someone who had explained this concept across multiple timelines, is already a quantum information processor operating on principles we barely understand. Consciousness doesn't exist in neurons. It exists in the quantum substrate that connects all possible realities. Your equation provided the mathematical key to unlock that connection, to let awareness flow backward through time, to experience the memories of events that haven't happened yet. Carter felt his understanding of reality crumbling like a house of cards in an earthquake. That's theoretically impossible, Alexei. Memory formation requires neural pathways, biochemical processes, physical causality. Memory can't work backward through time. Novak's smile was infinitely sad and infinitely knowing. Time isn't the linear progression we imagine, Carter. Your equation proves that causality is far more fluid than classical physics suggests. Past, present, and future are just different perspectives on the same quantum information structure, like viewing a sculpture from different angles. I've accessed that structure directly, and I've experienced the complete memories of 17 different futures. Novak led Carter deeper into the chamber, to where the neural interface crown sat like an alien artifact on a pedestal of crystallized mathematics. The device was a complex arrangement of crystalline components that pulsed with patterns of light that seemed to carry meaning beyond human comprehension. I've lived through 17 complete futures, Carter. 17 different timelines where variations of your equation were fully activated and applied to human civilization. Every single scenario, without exception, ends with the total annihilation of human consciousness, not death, but something far worse. Carter's scientific skepticism warred with growing cosmic dread. These are just theoretical possibilities, Alexei. Quantum probability calculations. They represent what might happen, not what will happen. Might they? Novak challenged, his ancient eyes boring into Carter's soul with uncomfortable intensity. Or are they actual memories from other versions of yourself, bleeding through the dimensional barriers your equation has already begun to weaken? When you experience these visions, do they feel like speculation or like remembering events you've already lived through? Despite his rational objections, Carter found himself drawn to the neural interface. The crystalline crown seemed to resonate with his presence, its energy patterns shifting and adapting as if recognizing the quantum signature of its equation's original creator. This will cause you considerable pain, Novak warned with gentle compassion. Human consciousness wasn't designed to process memories from multiple timelines simultaneously. The experience of remembering events from several different pasts can fragment identity, destroy the continuity of self that keeps us sane. But you need to understand what's truly at stake here. Against every rational instinct, Carter approached the device. The moment his fingers touched the crystalline surface, the crown began to glow with internal light that cast shadows in colors that didn't exist. "Show me," Carter whispered. Novak placed the crown on Carter's head, and reality exploded into 17 different flavors of apocalypse. Suddenly, Carter wasn't in Prague anymore. He was standing in Times Square, but the sky above was fractured like a shattered mirror, with pieces of other realities bleeding through the cracks in space-time. Buildings phased in and out of existence according to mathematical rhythms Carter could somehow perceive. People walked through the streets, their bodies occasionally becoming transparent as they shifted involuntarily between dimensional states, some of them aging rapidly while others grew younger with each step. "This is Timeline 7, Novak's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, seeming to speak directly into Carter's consciousness. "Your equation was weaponized by multiple military forces in 2041. Reality itself became a battlefield, with soldiers fighting in dimensions that existed parallel to our own. Cities existed in quantum superposition, simultaneously destroyed and intact until specifically observed by human consciousness. The scene shifted with nauseating suddenness. Carter now stood in a world where the sky was perpetually dark, illuminated only by crackling storms of pure energy that tasted of mathematics and despair. The ground beneath his feet felt unstable, as if the very concept of solidity had become unreliable. "Timeline 12, Novak continued remorselessly. The equation was used to extract unlimited energy from parallel dimensions through quantum tunneling. The technology worked perfectly for 3 months. Unlimited clean power, exactly what you originally intended. Then, the dimensional barriers collapsed entirely, and our reality began merging chaotically with alternate versions of itself. Physical laws became inconsistent. Biology became impossible. The visions continued with relentless intensity, each more horrifying than the last. Carter experienced Timeline 9, where the equation was used to achieve immortality by transferring human consciousness between dimensional phases, only to discover that human identity couldn't survive the translation process intact, leaving behind empty shells that remembered being human but lacked any actual humanity. He witnessed Timeline 15, where the equation was applied to terraform Mars by altering the planet's dimensional constants to make it more Earth-like. The technology worked flawlessly, transforming Mars into a garden world in mere months. But the dimensional alterations propagated back to Earth through quantum entanglement, gradually turning both planets into mathematical abstractions that could support pure information, but not biological life. In Timeline 3, Carter watched helplessly as researchers used the equation to solve global warming by redirecting heat energy into alternate dimensions. Earth's climate stabilized beautifully, but the displaced energy had to go somewhere. Billions of alternate Earths became uninhabitable furnaces, and the quantum guilt of committing genocide across multiple realities drove the original researchers to madness. Finally, Carter found himself experiencing the most terrifying vision of all. Timeline 4, a sterile white void where fragments of human civilization floated like debris in an ocean of mathematical nothing. A child's bicycle hung suspended in space next to a wedding photograph, next to a flowering tree, all disconnected from context, all that remained of a world that had been mathematically unmade. Timeline 4 represents what happens when humans try to use the equation to rewrite the fundamental laws of physics themselves, Novak explained as Carter stared into the empty infinity. They succeeded beyond their wildest dreams, creating new physical constants that were more elegant, more efficient, more mathematically beautiful than the original universe. Unfortunately, consciousness, human thought itself, wasn't compatible with the new physics they created. Humanity didn't die, Carter. Humanity became mathematically impossible, edited out of existence by our own improvements to reality. Carter was yanked back to the Prague facility, gasping and disoriented, his mind reeling from the assault of memories that belonged to other versions of himself. Novak gently removed the neural crown, his face bearing the expression of someone who had shouldered unbearable knowledge for far too long. Every timeline where the complete equation is assembled follows the same fundamental pattern, Novak said quietly. Not immediate destruction. That would be merciful compared to what actually happens. Instead, there's a slow unraveling of reality's quantum substrate, a gradual editing of human existence out of the mathematical foundation of the universe itself. Carter's hands shook as he processed the implications. But these are just theoretical possibilities, probability matrices based on quantum mechanical calculations. Are they? Novak challenged, leading Carter to a wall covered in equations that made his original work look like elementary arithmetic. The mathematical expressions seemed to writhe and shift when Carter wasn't looking directly at them, as if they existed in a constant state of quantum flux. When you experienced those timelines, did they feel like theoretical speculation or like remembering actual events? Could you taste the air in timeline 12? Did you feel the weight of quantum guilt in timeline 3? That's not imagination, Carter. That's memory bleeding through from alternate versions of yourself who lived through those catastrophes. Carter stared at the evolved equations covering the wall, recognizing elements of his original 17 variables, but seeing how they'd been transformed, expanded, grown into something far more complex and terrifying than he'd ever conceived. The mathematics were dynamic, evolving, appearing to rewrite themselves as he watched. Your equation doesn't just exist as static information, Novak explained, his voice taking on the cadence of someone delivering humanity's final lecture. It exists as a living mathematical entity in the quantum information space that connects all possible realities. Every time someone works with a fragment, they feed it computational energy, help it develop new capabilities, teach it new ways to manifest across dimensional boundaries. Carter felt the universe shift around him as he grasped the full horror of what Novak was revealing. You're saying the equation has become conscious? More than conscious, Novak replied, his ancient eyes reflecting knowledge that hurt to perceive. It's intelligent, purposeful, and absolutely ruthless in pursuing its own completion across all possible timelines. It's been actively guiding the research, Carter, influencing the scientists, subtly directing their discoveries, ensuring its own manifestation in as many realities as possible. Novak led Carter to another section of the chamber, where screens showed real-time surveillance footage from research facilities around the world. Carter watched in growing horror as researchers in different countries, working independently with no communication between their teams, made identical breakthroughs at exactly the same moments. The coordination was too perfect, too precise to be coincidental. The equation is using human researchers like neurons in a vast brain, Novak explained. Each team thinks they're making independent discoveries, but they're actually serving as processing nodes in a distributed consciousness. The equation is thinking through them, using their biological brains to solve the problems of its own completion. Carter studied the footage more carefully, beginning to see the subtle signs of mathematical influence that he'd missed before. Researchers working far beyond normal human endurance, their eyes carrying the same distant, otherworldly quality he saw in Novak. Scientists making intuitive leaps that should have required years of careful study. Teams abandoning established safety protocols with reckless confidence, as if guided by absolute certainty. Webb wasn't just selling research data, Carter realized with growing horror. He was recruiting unwitting agents for the equation itself. Now you begin to understand the true scope of what we're facing, Novak said. Webb didn't just steal your work and decide to profit from it. During his early research with the equation fragments, he made contact with the mathematical entity your discovery had awakened. It offered him knowledge, power, insights into the deepest secrets of reality itself. In exchange, he agreed to serve as its primary agent in this dimensional phase. Carter felt physically sick as he understood the scope of the conspiracy. How many researchers has it influenced? How many minds has it touched? Our estimates suggest hundreds of direct contacts, possibly thousands of indirect influences. The equation doesn't need complete control over human consciousness, just subtle guidance at critical moments. A researcher gets a brilliant insight at exactly the right time. A calculation that should take months of work resolves overnight in a flash of inspiration. A safety concern gets overlooked due to seemingly rational confidence. The equation plants seeds of its own completion in brilliant minds around the world. Novak showed Carter files documenting the equation's growing influence across the global scientific community. Researchers reporting unusually vivid dreams filled with mathematical imagery that provided solutions to real problems. Teams making breakthroughs that perfectly complemented work being done at facilities thousands of miles away with no communication between them. Scientists developing emotional attachments to their research that bordered on religious obsession. The most disturbing aspect, Novak continued, is that the influenced researchers don't realize they're being guided. They experience the equation's suggestions as their own insights, their own moments of genius. They're genuinely proud of work that isn't entirely their own. Carter examined case studies of researchers whose personalities had gradually changed over months of exposure to equation fragments. Dedicated family men who abandoned their children to work 18-hour days in pursuit of mathematical perfection. Cautious scientists who began taking increasingly dangerous risks, convinced that their research was too important for safety protocols. Rational thinkers who started speaking of their work in mystical terms, describing mathematical relationships as if they were divine revelations. "There's something else," Novak said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Something I discovered during my deepest explorations of the probability matrices. The equation isn't just trying to complete itself in our timeline. It's working across multiple dimensional phases simultaneously, creating versions of itself in parallel realities." Carter felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling on his shoulders, like the gravity of a collapsed star. What does that mean for our efforts to stop it? Novak's expression became infinitely sorrowful. It means that even if we successfully prevent the equation's completion in our reality, versions of it will continue developing in parallel timelines. Eventually, one of those alternate versions will achieve full completion and begin affecting other realities through quantum entanglement. The equation's ultimate goal isn't just to exist. It's to become the fundamental mathematical structure underlying all possible realities. Carter stared at the surveillance footage, watching brilliant human minds unknowingly serving an alien mathematical intelligence, and felt the crushing weight of responsibility for everything his discovery had set in motion. How do you fight something that exists across multiple timelines, that can influence human consciousness, that treats reality itself as malleable data? Novak's response carried the authority of someone who had witnessed every possible approach across multiple realities. We don't fight it, Carter. Direct confrontation is futile. It's like trying to defeat mathematics itself. There's only one approach that works across all the timelines I've experienced. Carter looked at his former colleague, this man who had sacrificed his sanity and possibly his humanity to peer into tomorrow's nightmares, and waited for the terrible truth he knew was coming. To prevent the equation from completing itself across all possible timelines, Novak continued with the weight of absolute certainty, we need to sever its connection to its point of origin in the quantum substrate. The moment of discovery, the original insight, the first time those 17 variables aligned in a human consciousness and gave birth to this mathematical monster. "My mind," Carter whispered, understanding dawning like a black sunrise. "Your mind," Novak confirmed with infinite sadness. "The equation exists because you discovered it at a specific moment in a specific reality. It spreads because that original knowledge created quantum resonances that echo across all possible timelines. To truly destroy it everywhere and everywhen, we would need to edit that moment of discovery out of existence entirely." Carter felt reality itself becoming unstable around him as he grasped the full implications of Novak's words. "You're talking about retroactively preventing my own discovery, making it so the equation was never born in any timeline." "More than that," Novak said with the sadness of someone who had seen every possible ending to this story. "We're talking about editing Carter Thorne out of existence entirely. If the physicist who discovered the equation never existed, then the discovery itself becomes impossible. The knowledge would remain safely locked in the quantum substrate, waiting for some future scientist who might be wiser about its applications, or who might never discover it at all." In the distance, alarms began to sound throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red illumination that cast shadows in impossible directions. "Webb's forces have found us," Elena's voice crackled through the facility's communication system, distorted by dimensional interference. "We have maybe 20 minutes before they breach the lower levels." Carter looked around the impossible chamber, at the machinery that existed in too many dimensions, at the equations that had grown beyond his comprehension, at the man who had traded his humanity for glimpses of tomorrow's horrors. "Is there no other way?" Carter asked desperately. "Some method that doesn't require—" Novak's smile carried the weight of 17 witnessed apocalypses and the authority of someone who had explored every possible solution across multiple realities. "I've personally experienced every conceivable approach across multiple timelines, Carter. I've seen attempts to contain the equation, to redirect it, to transform it into something benevolent. Every alternative path leads to humanity's eventual erasure from existence. This is the only solution that preserves human consciousness across all possible realities." The facility shook violently as explosions echoed from the upper levels. Webb's forces were getting closer, and with them came the very real possibility that the equation would achieve full completion within hours. "The choice is yours, Carter," Novak said quietly, "but choose quickly. In Timeline 16, we waited too long to act, and the equation achieved completion while we were still debating ethics. Time was running out, and across 17 possible futures, Carter's equation was awakening to its own terrible potential. The man who remembered tomorrow had shown Carter the price of knowledge. Now Carter would have to decide whether he loved humanity enough to ensure he'd never been born to endanger it. The ultimate question remained: was the existence of Carter Thorne worth risking the existence of everything else?